All right, so welcome to another deep dive. We all have ideas, sometimes even like really good ones, But how do you actually go from idea to like actually making something real?
It's a great question, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we often get stuck on is like just that initial hurdle. We think, okay, I've got this amazing idea,
Yeah, like that's the hard part.
right? I've got the idea. Now it's just execution. But as it turns out, that execution part is, well, it's a bit more challenging than we might initially think.
Oh, yeah. You brought a book to help us through this,
I
right?
did. So you send over Radical Focus, Achieving Your Most Important Goals with Objectives and Key Results by Christina Wodtke.
That title already just sounds like intense. Who is this Christina Wodtke? Like, what's her deal?
She's got quite the resume. She's a principal at Wodtke Consulting. She teaches at California College of the Arts and also at Stanford Continuing Education. But, beyond that, she's had some really serious experience leading product development and redesigns for companies. Some pretty big names like LinkedIn, MySpace, and Zynga.
Okay, yeah, those are some pretty big names. So she's not just an academic. She's actually been in the trenches, like making things happen.
Right. And on top of that, she's also founded several startups and founded this online magazine called Boxes and Arrows. So yeah, she's definitely got a lot of experience to draw on.
So she's seen this problem firsthand, right? This whole like, I have an idea, but thing.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to really dive into today. Specifically for you, how can you take those ideas that you've got bouncing around in your head and actually turn them into something real, something impactful? And, along the way, how do you stay focused on what actually matters and what's most important?
Okay, so this deep dive is kind of like our cheat sheet for you to get the most out of this book without having to read the whole thing, right? We're going to
Yeah.
break it down.
That's exactly right. We're going to extract the core principles. We're going to make sure that you walk away with a practical framework that you can actually implement in your own life or in your work.
Cool. All right, so let's dive in. Where do we start?
So right off the bat, Wodtke kind of tackles this like almost romanticized notion that we have around the idea. She even mentioned something Neil Gaiman, the author, has said, where, it's this idea that coming up with a brilliant idea is the hard part.
Hmm.
Like once you've got that, the rest is just, details, just execution.
Oh, yeah, like you hear people say that all the time, right? Oh, the idea is the thing. Like, if you have a good idea, everything else will just fall into place.
Yeah, it's very seductive, right?
Yeah.
But what Wodtke argues, and I think pretty convincingly, is that ideas are actually, they're pretty common. Like they're not actually the rarest commodity.
Oh, interesting. So it's not the idea itself, it's what?
The real work, the real challenge is in the execution. It's about taking that idea and figuring out the right form for it, building the team, and maybe most importantly, maintaining that focus throughout the whole process.
Okay, yeah. I mean, think about it. Like, how many times have you had, like, what you thought was a brilliant idea, but then life just gets in the way?
Exactly. There's always something, right?
Yeah.
And that's why Wodtke says this. She says, it's not important to protect an idea. It's important to protect the time it takes to make it real.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's actually a really powerful way to look at it. It's not about, like, hoarding the idea. It's about giving yourself the space and the time to actually bring it to life.
Exactly. So how do we do that, right?
Yeah.
How do we protect that time amidst all the distractions and the other demands that we inevitably have in our lives?
Right. So Wiki gives us a system, right? A framework to help us actually make this happen. Can you break that down for us?
She does. She proposes a three-part system. The first part is setting goals, and not just any goals. They have to be both inspiring and measurable.
Okay, inspiring and measurable. So not just like, I want to be successful. It has to be something more concrete.
Right. And that's where this, this term you hear a lot these days, this concept of OKRs comes in, objectives and key results.
Okay, OKRs. I feel like I've heard of those, but maybe not totally clear on what they are. Can you break that down for us a little bit?
Absolutely. So basically, an OKR has two main parts, right? You got the objective, which is kind of your qualitative, inspirational goal. It's what you want to achieve. So like Wodtke uses this example, launch a killer game.
Okay, so that's like the big picture, the thing that's going to get you excited.
Exactly. It should be something that really motivates you and your team. Now, the second part, the key results, those are the quantitative, measurable metrics that will actually tell you if you've achieved that objective.
So those are the like concrete milestones along the way.
Exactly. So for our killer game, a key result might be something like reach 25,000 downloads per day or generate $50,000 in revenue per day. something concrete, something you can measure, something that tells you without a doubt whether you're on track or not.
Gotcha. So the objective is like the North Star, the thing that's guiding you. And the key results are like the checkpoints along the way, making sure you're actually making progress.
Perfect analogy. And it's interesting, this OKR system, it actually has some pretty impressive roots. Wodtke kind of credits Intel with developing it. But it really took off in companies like Google, Zynga, LinkedIn, and General Assembly.
Okay, so it's not just some like theoretical thing. Companies that are known for like actually getting things done, they're using this.
Right. And often it's seen as a key factor in their really rapid and, sustained growth.
Okay, so how do we actually write good objectives and key results? Like, what are the things to keep in mind?
So for a good objective, it needs to be truly inspiring. It should resonate with you, with your team, beyond just like hitting some number. It needs to tap into a deeper purpose.
It's got to mean something.
Exactly. Now, for key results, those need to be grounded, measurable, and this is interesting. Wodtke even suggests they should be a little bit scary.
Scary, like how so?
Ambitious, right. Ambitious enough that you're not totally sure if you can achieve them, but not so crazy that they feel impossible. It's about pushing yourselves.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. So we've got our inspiring goals, our measurable key results, but then there's the whole like actually doing the work part. How do we connect our day-to-day actions to these bigger, more ambitious goals?
Right. That's the second part of Wodtke's system. And, it's something we all struggle with, right? Like, how do we prioritize the important stuff when there's so many urgent things screaming for our attention?
Well, yeah. Emails, meetings, fires to put out, all that.
Exactly. And, you've probably heard of this, like the important urgent matrix. It's a framework that helps you categorize tasks based on, well, how urgent they are and how important they are. And what Wodtke points out is that it's those important but not urgent tasks that are so hard to consistently focus on.
Oh, yeah. Those are the ones that always seem to get pushed to the back burner.
Right. So her solution is pretty practical. She says, time constrain those important non-urgent items. Give them a deadline. Force yourself to prioritize them.
Yeah. Oh, that's clever. So instead of like work on the long-term strategy document, it becomes schedule 2 hours this week to outline the long-term strategy document.
Exactly. It creates a sense of urgency, right? And then the second piece of this is accountability. She gives examples like personal accountability, like signing up for a personal trainer.
Okay, yeah. Someone's expecting you to show up. You're paying for it. So you're more likely to actually do it.
Exactly. And in a work context, it could be making a public commitment to your priorities within your team, and then regularly tracking your progress. That act of tracking not only keeps you accountable, but it also makes you more aware of where your time is actually going.
Yeah, I like that. It's not just about like setting a goal and hoping for the best. It's about having systems in place to actually make sure you're moving towards it.
Exactly. And that brings us to the third part of Wodtke's system, this idea of cadence, a regular rhythm of commitment and celebration.
Okay, so it's not just about the work. It's about like how you structure that work.
Right. And she really emphasizes starting every week with a very clear public setting of intentions or priorities. Tell your team what you intend to accomplish that week, specifically in service of your OKRs. It creates that shared purpose, that accountability.
Okay, so it's not just like you having this goal in your head. It's about everyone being on the same page, knowing what they're working towards.
Right. And then, to end the week, she suggests a Friday celebration. Take time to acknowledge and appreciate what's been accomplished, no matter how small.
Oh, I like that. So it's not just about the grind. It's about like actually acknowledging the wins along the way.
Exactly. That's how you build momentum, right? That's how you keep the energy up.
So we've got our inspiring goals, our measurable key results, a system for staying accountable, and a regular rhythm of work and celebration. But, the reality is things don't always go according to plan, right? There are always distractions, things that pop up, things that pull us off course.
Oh, absolutely. And Wodtke uses this really interesting analogy to illustrate this point. She talks about the myth of Atalanta.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one. What's that about?
So Atalanta, she was this incredible runner, right? Like super fast. And she was about to win this really important race. But her competitor, this guy named Hippomenes, he had this strategy. He started throwing these golden apples in her path.
Golden apples? Like, why?
They were beautiful, right? Shiny, distracting. And each time one of these apples rolled by Atalanta, she couldn't resist. She had to stop and pick it up. And ultimately, because of those distractions, those golden apples, she ended up losing the race.
Oh, wow. So it's a metaphor for like all those shiny objects that pull us away from our goals.
Exactly. And in the startup world, those golden apples could be anything. It could be the opportunity to speak at a big conference, which sounds great, but maybe it doesn't actually align with your current priorities.
Yeah, or like a potential client that wants something totally different from what you're trying to build.
Right. And it can be really hard to say no.
Yeah.
Right. But the point is, you have to be vigilant. You have to constantly evaluate whether those new opportunities are actually serving your core objectives. And you have to have the discipline to stick to your goals, even when those distractions seem really, really tempting.
Okay, so how do we put this all together? How do we actually make this work in the real world? Wodtke uses a fictional case study in the book, right, to kind of illustrate how this all plays out.
She does. She tells the story of this startup called TB. And it's really helpful because you see how these principles, they actually work, or sometimes how they don't work in practice.
Okay, tell us about TB.
So TB, they were founded by these two people, Hannah and Jack, and their mission was pretty simple: bringing great tea to people who love it.
Okay, that's a nice mission. Everyone loves tea.
Right. And their initial strategy was to build an online marketplace, connecting these small independent tea producers with individual customers.
Kind of like an Etsy, but for tea.
Exactly. But they ran into some issues pretty quickly. They had a good number of tea producers signing up, but getting the buyers, that was proving to be a lot harder than they expected.
Oh, yeah, classic startup problem, right? Like building the supply is one thing, but getting the demand, that's the real challenge.
Exactly. And so, they're starting to get a little worried. Their growth is slow, and they're not sure if their business model is actually sustainable. And this is where we start to see these two founders, Hannah and Jack. They have different approaches, different mindsets.
Oh, okay. Tell us about that.
So Hannah, she's very pragmatic. She's focused on results. She starts exploring these deals with restaurant suppliers, seeing it as a more immediate, more reliable way to generate revenue.
Okay, so she's looking for like a quick win, something to get some cash flowing.
Exactly. Jack, on the other hand, he's more idealistic. He's really attached to that original vision, selling their amazing tea directly to tea enthusiasts. He sees working with suppliers as like compromise.
Oh, I see. So we have this classic founder tension, right? The pragmatist versus the idealist.
Exactly. And things kind of come to a head when Hannah suggests they actually pivot the company's focus to these restaurant supplier relationships. And Jack, he's not happy about it. He sees it as a betrayal of their original mission, a betrayal of the quality they're trying to build.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a tough conversation.
It is. And this is where their angel investor, Jim Frost, comes in. And he gives them some really valuable advice.
Okay, what does he say?
So Jim, he stresses how important focus is, especially for a young company. And he talks about the need to make tough decisions, even if they're not always easy or popular.
Yeah, sometimes you have to, like, kill your darlings, right? Even if you're emotionally attached to an idea.
Right. And Jim even introduces this concept. He calls it the revolving door test. It's based on this story of how Intel made this really pivotal decision to exit the memory chip business, even though, it was a big part of their history.
Oh, wow. So he's saying you have to be willing to let go of things, even things that were once successful, if they're no longer serving your core goals.
Exactly. And he asks Hannah and Jack this really powerful question. He says, if you were hired today as the new CEO of TB, what would you do?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great way to force yourself to like step outside of your emotional attachments and look at the situation objectively.
Right. And ultimately it leads them to this, somewhat reluctant agreement to really prioritize the supplier opportunity. But they're going to do it while still maintaining their high product standards.
Okay, so they're finding a compromise, they're adapting their strategy, but not abandoning their core values.
Exactly. And then Jim, the angel investor, he suggests they implement OKRs to help them stay focused on this new direction.
Okay, back to the OKR. So how do they go about setting those?
So they have this kind of funny scene where they're sitting in Starbucks, with Jim, trying to figure out their objectives and key results. And, as is often the case, their first attempt is not exactly perfect.
Yeah, it takes practice, right?
Yeah.
Figuring out how to set those goals in a way that's both ambitious and achievable.
Right. And then we see Hannah, she announces this strategic pivot to the whole TB team. And as you can imagine, there are mixed reactions.
Oh, yeah. I bet some people were excited. Some people are probably a little nervous.
Right. One of their employees, Eric, he's particularly concerned because he was really passionate about working directly with the tea farmers. And he's worried that this shift to suppliers might mean they're losing sight of that.
Okay, so even with the clearer direction, there's still this challenge of getting everyone on board, making sure the whole team understands and buys into the new priorities.
Absolutely. And, what's interesting is as the story unfolds, you really see how, like, even with the best intentions, it can be hard to actually implement these principles in the day-to-day reality of running a business.
Oh, yeah. Like, it's one thing to, understand the concept of OKRs. It's another thing to actually live it.
Right. So, for example, Jack, he really struggles with this whole, data entry and reporting that's now required with this supplier-focused model. And he keeps prioritizing these, tea tastings and these direct-to-consumer efforts, which, they're not bad in themselves, but they're not directly contributing to their new OKRs.
Oh, I see. So he's kind of, still holding on to that old vision, even though the company has shifted direction.
Right. It increases tension, right? Because Hannah, she's laser focused on generating revenue through the supplier channel, which is what they need to do to survive. But Jack, he's still all about product perfection and brand building, which are important, but, maybe not the top priority at this moment.
So they're not really on the same page anymore. And I'm guessing that lack of alignment, it starts to cause problems.
It does. They end up missing their key results. And, they start to run out of money. It gets pretty stressful.
Oh, no. That's the worst case scenario for a startup, right? Running out of runway.
It is. And there's this, pretty intense moment where Hannah, she kind of breaks down. She's so frustrated because they're not making progress. And they both realize that under pressure, they've kind of reverted back to their old habits.
So when things get tough, it's easy to fall back on what you're comfortable with, even if it's not the most effective approach.
Exactly. And that's when this new character enters the picture, this potential CTO named Raphael.
Okay, Raphael, what does he bring to the table?
So Raphael, he takes one look at their OKRs and he's like, you guys are doing it wrong.
Oh, really? What's he seeing that they're not?
He realizes they're trying to do too much. They have way too many objectives, which means they're spreading themselves too thin.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense. It's like that classic saying, if you chase two rabbits, you won't catch either one.
Exactly. So Raphael, he introduces this much more simplified approach. He says, focus on one key objective for the company, and then have 3 really important key results that support that objective.
Okay, so less is more. Focus on the things that truly matter.
Exactly. And he also introduces these weekly confidence ratings for each key result. And he sets up these really structured weekly check-ins where they have to talk about, their intentions for the week, any potential challenges they foresee, their current status on their key results, and, just the overall health of the business.
Okay, so he's bringing in more structure, more accountability, and more focus.
Right. And you know what? It works.
It does. Tell me more.
They start making real progress. They're hitting their goals. And, just the whole energy of the company, it shifts.
So they're not just getting more done. They're actually feeling better about it, too.
Exactly. And they even start doing these Friday win sessions where they, take time to celebrate their accomplishments.
Oh, I love that. Recognizing the wins. That's so important.
It is. And, they even make this really, really tough decision, but it was probably the right decision, to let go of one of their team members, Anya, whose role just didn't really align with their new focus.
Yeah, sometimes you have to make those hard choices, right? To stay true to your goals.
It's tough. But ultimately, it allowed them to maintain that really crucial focus.
So the TV story, it's like a reminder that this stuff actually works, but it also shows that it's not always easy, right? There are going to be challenges. There are going to be setbacks.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why, in addition to the TD story, Wodtke also outlines some really common reasons why important goals just, they don't happen.
Oh, that's helpful. Let's talk about those. What
Yeah.
are some of the things that trip people up?
So the first one, and we saw this with TB, is trying to do too much, having too many goals at once. It's so important to have that single, clear objective for a given period.
Okay, so prioritize. Don't try to boil the ocean.
Right. The second one is poor communication. You might have a clear goal in your head, but if you don't communicate it clearly and consistently to your team, well, they're not going to be able to help you achieve it.
Yeah, it's easy to assume that everyone's on the same page, but
Yeah.
you really have to over-communicate, especially when it comes to important goals.
Absolutely. And then the third one is not having a plan. It's one thing to have this big, ambitious objective, but you need to break it down into actionable steps. You need to have a roadmap.
A plan of attack.
Exactly. The fourth one is not making time for what matters. We talked about this earlier, right? Those important but not urgent tasks, they always seem to get pushed aside. You have to proactively schedule time for them.
Block it out on the calendar. Make it non-negotiable.
Right. And then the fifth one is giving up too easily. When you hit a roadblock, when you experience a setback, it's easy to just throw in the towel.
Yeah.
But that's not how you achieve big goals. You have to learn from those setbacks. You have to iterate. You have to keep going.
Yeah, resilience is key. All right, so before we get into the really nitty-gritty details of setting OKRs, there's one more important concept that Wodtke emphasizes, this idea of having a clear mission.
Yes, this is really important. She argues that before you even start thinking about OKRs, you need to have a solid understanding of your mission, your why.
Okay, so what is it that you're ultimately trying to achieve? What's the bigger purpose behind all this?
Exactly. And the reason this is so important is because your mission provides the context for your goals. It helps you make sure that your OKRs are actually aligned with what you're truly trying to achieve.
So it's the mission is the North Star, and the OKRs are the steps you take to get there.
Perfect analogy. And she even gives this helpful formula for crafting a mission statement. She says, we reduce pain improved life in market by value proposition.
Okay, I like that. It's simple, but it forces you to really think about what you're offering and who you're offering it to.
Right. And she also gives examples from some really successful companies like Google, Amazon, Zynga, and even Phil's Coffee, to show how a clear mission can guide all of your decisions, both big and small.
All right, so we've got our mission, our North Star. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts of actually setting OKRs. What are the key things we need to know?
All right, so first of all, remember the format. One objective, and then usually 3 to 5 key results that support that objective. Keep it simple.
Okay, so don't get too fancy. Just one main goal and a handful of ways to measure whether you're achieving it.
Exactly. And when you're setting those key results, think about that feeling you get in your stomach when you're pushing yourself a little bit.
Oh, you mean that little bit of nervousness, that feeling of, oh, I'm not sure if I can actually do this.
Exactly. That's usually a good sign. If your key results feel too easy, if you're totally confident you'll hit them, well, maybe you're not aiming high enough.
Okay, so push yourself a little bit, but not so much that it feels completely overwhelming.
Right. And then, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's not just about setting OKRs at the top of the organization.
Yeah.
You want to cascade them down. So the company has its OKRs. Each department has its OKRs. And even individual contributors can have their own OKRs that align with the bigger picture.
Okay, so it's about creating this web of goals where everyone's efforts are connected and moving in the same direction.
Exactly. And it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Yeah.
You want to be regularly reviewing your OKRs, checking in on your progress, adjusting your confidence levels, and having open discussions about what's working and what's not.
So it's an ongoing process, not just something you do at the beginning of the quarter and then forget about.
Right. And one thing that trips people up is this temptation to change their OKRs mid-quarter. Even if you realize oh, we set these wrong or the situation has changed, Wodtke's advice is to stick with them,
Yeah.
Learn from the experience and then adjust for the next quarter.
Okay, so don't panic and change course too quickly. Stay committed, see it through, and then use what you learn to make better decisions next time.
Exactly. And finally, I think it's really interesting how Wodtke talks about failure in the context of OKRs. She doesn't see it as this terrible thing.
Oh, yeah, a lot of people are really afraid of failure, right? But it sounds like she's saying it's actually part of the process.
It is. She says, if you're not failing to hit 100% of your key results, maybe you're not setting them ambitiously enough.
Oh, interesting. So it's if you're always hitting all your goals perfectly, maybe you're not really pushing yourself.
Right. The point is to stretch, to learn what you're truly capable of, and to get comfortable with the idea that sometimes you're going to fall short. But that's okay as long as you're learning from those experiences.
Okay, so to bring it all together, it sounds like achieving those big, important goals, it's not just about having a great idea, it's about having a system, a framework for actually making that idea a reality. And radical focus gives us a really practical roadmap for doing that through OKRs.
That's a great summary. And for you, our listener, remember the key takeaways, right? The power of a clear mission, the discipline of setting and reviewing those OKRs, Focusing on a few key things rather than trying to do everything at once, communicating clearly and consistently, and not being afraid of setbacks.
So as you think about your own goals, your own ambitions, ask yourself, how can you apply these principles? What are your golden apples, those distractions that might be pulling you off course? And what's your mission? What's the bigger why that's driving you forward?
We definitely encourage you to explore Radical Focus further. It's a great read. And, the whole concept of OKRs, there's a ton of information out there. So, dive in, learn more, and see how you can apply these principles to achieve your own goals.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.